Welcome to the Technology Alchemist, your source for technology advice, strategic technology planning, technology coaching, time-saving advice, and a pragmatic look at increasing revenue and profit for your technology engine. Now, I'm your host, the Technology Alchemist himself, Mike Mahoney. Today, our episode is sponsored by VP Virtual Assistants. If you need someone to help with the workload, VP Virtual Assistants definitely has someone who can help you out. Schedule a call or send in your needs at vpvirtualassistants.com. Now, today, it is my pleasure to have Susan Schultz as our guest. Susan has been coaching, mentoring, and guiding people through the world of talent management for over 30 years. She worked her way up from the bottom, cold calling for a recruiting firm. The firm did not think she was ready for recruiting, so she offered to work for straight commission to prove them wrong. She went on to become the second highest earning recruiter for that agency. She has always had that drive. Now she works with women between the ages of 40 and 60 who are longing for the next step in their career where they can live their best life. Women who are challenged with landing a new job, who want a promotion and keep getting passed up, or who aren't satisfied with what they're doing and want to change. She helps them make the change and transform their lives from frustration into one of passion and purpose via nonprofits. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, congratulations on making that move with the recruiting company. I actually coach my clients to do that kind of stuff. So it's nice to see. Tell me how that one thing helped the rest of your career.
Oh, that job shaped my life for a very long time. So I got that position right out of college. I felt I could definitely do it. And then I worked with him for several years and decided in my late 20s that I could do more. I could make more money and do more if I opened my own agency. So in my late 20s, I opened up my own agency that was very successful for 10 years. And then pivoted from there to HR and worked my way to my this business, which coaches with the women.
Great. So tell me a little bit about your new business, like what your current business, what you're doing, who your typical clients are, that sort of thing.
So my typical client are mostly women who range from 40 to 60. Recently in the pandemic, they could actually be college grads up to 40 now. So many people are making shifts or looking to make changes. They're looking at life differently. What I do is different than your typical career coach, because I don't really believe that's enough. So I believe it first starts with you and understanding your barriers, your limiting beliefs, the stories you tell yourself, where they came from, how you got them, how they evolved over time. And then we work on those. We give them tools to help them deal with their those stories or those limiting beliefs. And then we look at what kind of company should they work at? What should the culture be like? What should the team be like? What should the manager be like, right? Working on that based off of an assessment that tells us those kind of things. And then that way, they're not really just looking for a job. They're looking for that whole package, because we can get a job. Anyone can get a job. But in a year or two, we're stuck again because we only looked at the tasks required in the job, not the company and the team and the manager. So we work on that. I do what a career coach does, and I look at where they want to be in 10 or 15 years, depending on what experience they have today. And then we back out goals for that and what is the job that aligns with their goals for today. And then I teach them how to find a job. I don't find that job for them. I teach them how to find it. In today's world, the systems that are out there are really designed to weed out people, right?
Yes.
So applicants don't really know that. So they send out that same resume over and over again, and they get rejected time after time after time, or no one answers them. And it's really because they don't know how to apply for a job, how to speak that same language. So I teach them that, and then they work on finding their job. At the same time, we look at life. What do they want for their life in 10 or 15 years? What do they want? They dream about what that looks like, and how do they get there? And how does it align with career so that they can have all of it? But in really starts with themselves. And when they have all three pieces, that's success.
No, it
So
totally
that's
makes
what I work
sense.
at with them.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense because one of the things you said, and I have a client, I'm just going to call him Joe. And one of the reasons why Joe came to me was he would either have a really difficult time getting past the first round of interviews, or, I mean, he'd get his foot in the door, but he wouldn't get past the first round of interviews. He was smart enough to like modify his resume a little bit to highlight his skills that met that job description. That was a good move in his part. But then a lot of times he would lose the jobs and he couldn't understand why. And so that's what I had to do similar. I wish I had been able to work with him before he got in those situations, because it also made his resume look terrible. But I just worked with him on his time management skills, his communication skills. And those are just the intangibles that people who are looking for a job don't realize, that the employer, they're looking for that. And these days they are looking for you to speak to the job description. It's not enough to just send the resume and expect them to troll through it looking for the skills. You need to highlight those skills for that specific job. So, it's even more interesting in the technology world, of course, because there's a host of technology and you need to highlight that for each position. So that's really interesting. So I notice you say, via nonprofits. How does a nonprofit organization fit into this?
Well, I do work with nonprofits, but I don't do everything via nonprofit. Most of it is one-on-one coaching with clients. But I've gone into nonprofits and helped them shift culture. Culture where people have a revolving door, and how to shift that to having people want to work there, getting over that reputation of the revolving door. So in that regard, going into corporations, that's where nonprofit really comes in.
Makes sense.
A lot of times there's so much in a nonprofit that they expect from their employees that they don't have the capacity to give that much. And that capacity starts with themselves, right? Because they put themselves first. And when they're in a nonprofit, a lot of times they get sucked into putting the nonprofit first, right?
Right.
So they forget about themselves, and then they get stuck in the culture. They're all talking about how terrible it is. And when in reality, it's not as bad. But I go in and I can work on the culture of a nonprofit. But for the most part, my clients are one-on-one coaching. I do have some group coaching, and I have a webinar resume class that I just finished automating for people. So I think it's just all encompassing.
Do you have any advice for people who are using 100% remote teams on creating a company culture?
When I was in corporate, that was the hardest piece. And it wasn't the hardest piece as far as people working, because people did work and they did their jobs and they did them well, actually better than they did being in an office sometimes, especially technical people, right? And it was a technical company that I was the VP for, but the hardest piece is engaging them, is keeping them engaged. It's so easy to keep people engaged at the company and in the culture and all of that, and in the activities that go on. But when you have remote people in all different areas, all different locations, it becomes harder to engage them in the company, right? Although now there's more technical things out there that help with that, Zoom, bigger Zoom things and things like that can keep them integrated easier. However, When I had it, I used to fly them in for all events. So it was a high cost to the company, but anytime there was a company event that they should be at, like if they had monthly company meetings usually to update employees on different things, they flew in. They came in like they were salespeople, and they came in, and it kept them engaged. It kept them able to meet people in person that they're working with, right? So it's really just keeping them engaged and in the company instead of feeling like they're outsiders in the company.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have 5 different businesses that we operate, and so we have a large remote team, and that is one of the biggest challenges, is keeping them engaged. One of the ways we've solved it is we bring our operations manager here to work with us for a couple of weeks every few months in person.
Mhm.
And because to me, one of the hardest things to do is forge the relationship with the person. You just don't have that small talk time that you can get in the break room, whatever. You just don't have that. You're not passing each other at the copy machine and chit-chatting about what you did or your family or anything like that. So we've made it a huge effort. Like we do a weekly trivia via Slack that it gives like a 10-point question trivia thing. And even people who never even come close to the top play every week because it's fun for them, and they feel like they're part of a team. So bringing people here, that helps build culture. So what is the number one issue? Like, you're working with women who are in ages of 40 to 60. I would imagine there are changes that happen, divorce, death of a spouse, lots of different life changes. And I take it that's what you specialize in, helping these women who are having those kind of issues turn things around, find a job, and have a more purpose-driven life. So is that correct? I mean, is that what you're doing?
That's correct. So it's having the client look inward. What part did I play in that divorce? What part did I play in whatever the story is? I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not smart enough. What part did they play in getting there, right? How did they make the story bigger than it really is? Because it starts out here, right? And then it's like, I like to say it's like that Western movie with all the dust balls rolling down the street, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's exactly what happens to them. And also for women, a lot of times, now I have some male clients also, but for women especially, they start forgetting about themselves. They're trying to make sure their kids are okay, that they get all to their sports, their education is good. If they have a spouse, the spouse is okay. So now they don't have time for themselves or for any friends, right? So I find that they get to me, they don't have any friends, they don't have any outside interests, they don't have things for themselves. So a lot of times, sometimes you're not really stuck in your career, you're really stuck in life, right? Because there's no passion, there's no purpose, there's no excitement or joy anywhere, because you're just in this hectic mode all the time. And you go to the office and you're in the same way, right? A lot of times when they get through that dust, they find that if they can put themselves first, and we give them tools to do that, and make friends, get network into groups or different things, like everything shifts, even their career, because they have the capacity for all of it now, right? Because it starts with us. We don't have the capacity if we don't fill our own emotional bank, right? We just don't. We think we do, but we don't. We're doing
Right.
it
It's
in
the
the
old
wrong ways.
It's
Yep.
the old adage, you can't expect someone to love you if you don't love yourself.
That's right. That's right.
I mean,
So most of them, it
that's
starts there. They're in their own way in getting that promotion, or changing into a different field, or coming from being a stay-at-home mom into the work world. They are in their own way It's no one else's fault, but they think it is, right? I can't get a job because my kids don't get home from school till 3:30 and they'll be alone for an hour or whatever that looks like, right? There's stories that they're telling each other, telling themselves that are not even true stories, right? They could if they want to.
Yes, it's their own limiting beliefs. And I remember being a CTO for a company here in California, and there was a woman who worked there for, I worked there for 12 years. She worked there for 10. And when she left, I had gotten to know her pretty well as a CTO. She had a lot of requests. We talked to each other a lot. And when she left, I happened to be talking to the CEO, and I mentioned something about, oh, it's too bad she's not here, because that is exactly the kind of thing was her strength. He had no idea what her skills were, none, because she didn't do a good job of promoting herself to the CEO of what her skills were. When a opportunity would arise to be on a committee that would fit her skill set, she'd kind of shrink back. If she would have pushed herself out there, we would have been, everyone would have been aware, not just me, of what her skill set was. And I think that's what, it's not just women though. I think it's what workers in general, they don't promote their skills, especially, let's say you start a job today and these are your 5 skills that you bring to the job. And then you work on it and you add 3 more. You have to make sure your employer knows you have those skills, because when there's time for promotion, they're going to say, oh, Bob, he doesn't know how to do that. But Bob actually learned how to do that 2 years ago. They just don't know because Bob didn't let them know. You know what I'm saying?
Or Bob's doing that job, doing those 3 other things within his job that no one changed the job description. So now if there's a layoff or there's something that goes on, no one knows that Bob did that until Bob leaves, and then they're stuck, right? The company's stuck and Bob is feeling used, right? Because he did all that, no extra pay, went into his job description, now he has no job, right? Nobody recognized what he did. But in reality, he played a part, because he could go and say, hey, I'm now doing these 3 things. Even if they couldn't pay him, they could have the job description changed, right?
Yeah.
So that when the things happen, especially during the pandemic, they know what you do, right? It's not usually just that one thing, the job description. If you're there 10 years, you've evolved in that job description.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right?
And that's you're absolutely right. Like I actually think what more businesses ought to do is, number one, make sure they have a review process for their employees. But then number 2, as part of that review process, they should take out that job description and put it down on the table and go through it and say, is there anything on here that you're regularly responsible for that's not listed on here? Because we need to keep this up to date, because that would also go a long way towards letting your bosses know how the job's evolving, your skills have evolved, et cetera. So that's actually the job description was something kind of an aha moment when you said that to me.
Everybody does, no one realizes how important the job description is from the day that it's created the first time, all the way to them applying for a job. It is one of the most important documents, and we don't realize it. We get a job and we forget about it. We do our job and we don't. It should be part of the performance review, also because you want people to grow within the company. And if the manager understands that you're doing 5 different tasks and they're important to that job description, it's easier to promote. Or if something opens up that you have those skills and nobody, because they're doing it, you can recommend and say, hey, Bob, you should apply for this new job because you do these things, right? Bob may not realize he can apply for it, right?
Right.
So the job description, we don't really write them for nothing in HR. This is coming from the HR side, but we don't write them for nothing. We write them for performance reviews, for understanding if people are doing the tasks that they're supposed to be doing, for getting a new person when someone leaves. People don't realize that those tasks are in order When you see those bullet points on a job description, that's the order of importance in what you're going to be doing in the job. So if
Right.
you don't have the top 4 or 5, don't apply. Because you're
Yeah, it's a
probably
waste of
not
time.
going. You might have the bottom 3, but those are not as important as those top 4 or 5. So that's why you get rejected, because, but you can say, oh, I have these things. They're at the bottom. They are important, but these are much more important, right?
Right.
So the job description plays a huge role in your career within the company, as well as when you're applying for new roles.
I wanted to pile on something on that because, one of my areas of expertise is process management. And to me, like in our own business, we have SOPs for everything because, you get a new contractor, you just hand them the SOP, they run. But what we also did to make sure that the process was strong was there's recurring tasks to update and review the SOP, because you can't just put it out there. Your process evolves over time. And yes, that person knows that, but that's called institutional knowledge at that point, because if they leave, that knowledge leaves with them. It's the same. So I suggest that not only should companies make job descriptions and utilize them, and not only should they update them during the review process, but there should also be a regularly scheduled task. Maybe it's every 6 months, maybe it's every 3 months, maybe it's once a year, for somebody who's responsible for that writing of that job description to update that job description with what's changed. Because if you don't do that, most people, you say HR doesn't write the job description, just write the job description, and that's true. But what most managers do is file it in a cabinet somewhere,
Yep,
never
right.
look at it, never think about it. And the only time they pull it out, which is sort of unfair, is during the review. So how can you have molded your employee to do their job properly if you weren't even paying attention to their job description until you're reviewing them? It's not fair. But I strongly suggest that for every process, you put in a review task that will remind you to review it, because processes have to change. They evolve over time. And even a job description where, like we're talking about, who would have thought in 2019 that there'd be companies now that have 100% remote staff?
Yep.
I mean, and that in itself changes how things work, because you can no longer say, oh, you're going to attend the weekly staff meeting. Well, now it's an online staff meeting. So, you got to change that. I mean, there's just rules and things that change.
Yep. And I think you should go one step further. The job description should not only be tasks, it should be percent. You're being rewarded at the end of the year or quarterly or whatever that is on this percentage of this, what this is, and then what this is, and then what this is, because people think it's all equivalent, but it isn't, as the bullet points are. And I do believe they should be sitting down quarterly, which is what I used to do with all employees,
Us too.
with their manager quarterly, to review those and say, you're falling short on this. Or I know you're falling short because you got this extra task that we gave you, so that the employee under you feels like you get them, that you understand what they're doing. But at the same time, you're evaluating what they need to do by the end of the year in order to get a review, a bonus or a raise or whatever that looks like. Because for most of them, they go into the performance review blind. They're like, I don't know what my boss is going to say. I think I'm doing a great job, but what will I get? Then they walk out and they get a 2% increase.
Right.
And they're feeling like, oh my God, I did 4 different projects outside of my outside of my job description. But the manager, because like you said, doesn't know what they really do above and beyond or in that job description, they're only grading them on what they see on the paper. And by doing it quarterly, you're not only letting them know what they need to work on or what they're doing well in, but you're giving them that culture that says, we value you, right?
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the things that I changed when I was CTO. I actually was part of the executive team, and we didn't have an HR director. And when we hired an HR director, she was really big on the quote annual review. And I said, I don't feel like for my team, especially the annual reviews, they're great because if I have a guy who isn't supporting my customers with technology as well, I don't want to wait a year to talk about that, and I also don't want to just have to like write them up, because that's also, I try to be empathetic, and that's not going to help. I think it's better and it's less threatening to sit down when they know they're going to have a review every 3 months, and that they're going to sit down and have like a non-threatening conversation with their supervisor. I think everybody's happier because we don't dread that conversation, and there isn't going to be this huge stack of issues because you've been dealing with them all along. And I also think it's more fair to the employee because they know where they stand at all times. They're not going, how come boss is acting weird all of a sudden, and that's what happens when you let an issue bother you over time. We actually have it sounds harsh, but we have a philosophy here at our company where we hire slow, fire quickly. And
Oh, yeah.
and literally it comes down to this. If we see a performance issue, we deal with it like right away, and we let them get a chance to fix it. But if it keeps happening, well, then we have to get rid of that person and bring someone else in, because it just harms your business. But it gives that other person false hope, because eventually they're going to lose their job. So you might as well not drag it out. I mean, I can tell you, I've had employees where we've allowed that to happen, and we don't do that anymore. But the empathy is the part I'm trying to get at here. I think that employers don't realize how much empathy they're showing their employees by giving them a regular review. They think it's this big bad thing. And then they'll say, oh, we're not going to give them pay raises except for once a year. That's okay. They still want to know how they're doing in their job, because nobody wants to wait an entire year to find out that my boss had a problem with this, and this, never told me, and is now going to ding my pay raise because of those 3 issues that I could have fixed.
Yep.
Like you with the recruiting thing. You knew you could do the job, but I'm going to bet that had you insisted on a base salary and commission,
I wouldn't have
either they wouldn't have bothered. So, but by going commission, hell, as a business owner, I'm going to say, what have I got to lose? If she brings me business, I'm going to pay her a commission. So that means it's all on her. Well, then you proved them wrong, didn't you? I mean, like coming in, being the second highest recruiter, that's crazy. Like, but that goes to show you what can happen when employee is afraid to negotiate with employer. Because had you not had the guts to do that, you wouldn't have been able to get that opportunity, and you wouldn't have shown them. And also, like we talked about that kicked off this whole interview, it's what shaped the rest of your career.
It was one of the hardest companies I worked for too, because he was very structured and disciplined and old school back then, right? And so that's so different than it is even today. And so it shaped me, even though days I was like, oh, sucks. Like, like he so doesn't have any empathy or whatever, right? But in the end, it showed me what needs to happen, the ethical work ethic that you have to have, and the drive and the passion and the purpose to create your company or whatever it is that you want in your life or career. You have to have that drive, and you have to have that passion and purpose. If you don't, none of it will ever work.
I totally agree. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think people need to hear this type of thing straight from someone's mouth that's dealing with it on a regular basis. Especially, I do get concerned. I dealt with it. I mean, one of the reasons why my wife and I started our businesses 7 years ago was that I was 49 at the time, and I'd go for interviews. I'd meet with people that were my age. They would love me. Then they'd be negotiating with my recruiter for a salary, and then send me to meet with the team who were in their 20s. They didn't want dad working with them. So they'd say, oh, it's not a cultural fit. But it was becoming pretty clear that the age was the issue. And I finally asked the recruiter, and she said, I'm starting to think that too, because these companies are actually negotiating a salary. Why would they do that if they weren't 100% interested in you? And then miraculously, the younger ones don't think it's a cultural fit. So, I'm with you on this. I'm with you on this fight. I think the 40 to 60-year-old women, they're often the ones, let's be real, the standard model in society has always been man goes to work, woman stays home with the children.
Mhm.
And that's great as long as that relationship continues till death do us part. But if in our 40s we go our separate ways, now what does woman who's been at home for 20 years, how does she get back into the workforce? You know, and you're right. One thing I really resonated with me from the very beginning, this whole concept that they've lived life, they've had people tell them they're not pretty enough, they're not this enough, they're not that enough. It isn't true, but they believe it because that's what they've been
Mhm.
told over and over and over again. And now they're suddenly fit, but hey, I'm a great mom. I do great at being a mom, and no one can challenge me on that. I'm a great mom. But then all of a sudden it's, now I have to be a mom and I have to earn money. How am I going to do this? I haven't done that for 20 something years. And so I think in some women's positions, if they get married young enough, they may never have done it. And,
That's right.
you know, but it's not impossible to start, at that age. So I think the work you're doing is awesome. But why don't you tell people where they can find you?
So you can find me on my web page, inspiredintegration.org. I have Facebook pages. There's a Facebook page about getting unstuck and embracing change. And there's another one coming out about resumes with this automated class and then group coaching, because right now I feel like the employment is going to end for people, unemployment, and they're going to need to understand how to speak that language of the job description so that they can get a job, and so that they don't become more defeated than they were on unemployment and not finding a job and all that. So there will be a page for that with Inspired Integration, and I'm on every platform. I do have YouTube videos also. I'm always out there talking about tips that can help people.
Awesome. Well, anybody needs this kind of help, we now know where to find it. The links will be in the show notes and the video description, so they'll be able to find you there. But thanks again so much for being on, and thanks for listening to the Technology Alchemist.
Thank you.